Now, in the previous video, we went in and showed you how to do a Hello World program in Go. And in this video, I'm going to get in a little bit more depth and show you how to write some functions and how to call those functions. Now, Go's a little bit different from C and Java in the sense of how it organizes the function. Now, as we said in the previous video, let me change this to a color we don't have here. As we said in the previous video, Go uses the word func to denote the actual function that follows. So every function has got func in front of it. We also noted that you have to put the opening brace on the end of your function that you're defining. We have a return statement in here just like you have with Java and with Objective-C, and so this syntax is fairly common. You'll notice we don't have to put semicolons on the ends of our lines, so all of the semicolons here are missing. Again, you can put them in there if you want, but they're not required. You've got the same blocking style that we had in Java and Objective-C. And you'll also notice what I've done up here is a little different than the previous video, is we've added these open and closing parentheses. Now, all this is doing, I could put all of my imports on separate lines and say import string conversion, import format, and that's perfectly legal. But this is just a quicker, easier way to deal with all of your imports, is to put an open and closing parenthesis, and then you just put all of your imported packages that you want to import in here. Now, string convert, this package is actually used for this particular function. All it's doing is converting an integer number into a string so that we can print it with this print line function. So Go is a typed language, which means that you define what specifically you're going to have all of your variables be. And for me to use an integer, for example, as a string, I have to actually convert it. And this is just one way to do it, is this I to A. So the next thing I want to point out here is a little bit different, is that you'll notice we don't have a return type down here on the beginning of the functions like we do in Java. We actually put the return type here on the end of our closing parenthesis and before our opening brace. Now, one cool thing about Go is that I can actually have multiple return types or return variables if I want to. We'll get into that in more detail in a later video, but you can have more than one return type, and this is actually the only programming language that I've ever seen that allows you to do that. I'm sure there's other ones out there, but in my experience, this is the only one that I've seen. So it's a pretty cool feature where you can actually return more than one thing from the call. Now, the other thing I want to point out here is that in Java and Objective-C, you typically put your type, which is this part of the function, before the actual variable name. In Go, you actually put it the way your brain would think. In other words, this is the variable name, this is what the type is. So it actually makes it a little bit easier to think through things as you're doing them. For example, if you remember in C, we did something like this. We said int is a pointer, and we're going to call it myvar. Well, if you're trying to describe this, myvar is the name of your variable. This tells you that it is a pointer, and this tells you the type of variable that it's pointing at. So to try to read this left to right, you would say I have an integer pointer called myvar. Well, in Go, you do exactly the opposite. I would have myvar is a pointer to a type int. So it makes a whole lot more sense. And the other thing is, when we dereference this, you dereference it on the same side that you create it, so you're not having to bounce back and forth like you do in C. So it's got some pretty neat things in the language. Now, you'll notice here that I'm just doing a return n+2, and I've got another function down here called subtract numbers. We pass it in two variables, so we've got two variables getting sent in, one variable getting sent back out, and then here we're just returning n-2, n1 minus n2. So these tell me what type of variables those two guys are, and then this is just what's happening in the function. So the point in this video is not really to do a whole lot of complex programming, but more just to kind of introduce you to the way that you do functions inside of Go compared to some of the other languages that are out there. So it's a pretty neat language. Everything is laid out really well. Again, this right here is the only thing that I've ever run into that irritates me. The rest of the language is pretty slick. So in the next video, we're going to get into more of how to create a structure and how that compares to what we were doing in Java with our classes.